Welcome everybody to my review of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. After 100 plus hours, I have just rolled the credits. You've got some music in the background, which is the Final Fantasy soundtrack that's just going to play through. And I'm going to roll some footage of just the Gold Cup Chocobo races from in the Gold Sources. There's no story in there, there's no spoilers for that. There will be some spoilers on the story, so I will mention that when it comes up. But let's let's get going then on my review as I flip over. So I want to talk about as much of the game as possible. As I said, I don't want to give too many spoilers away. There will be some on there, but the short version of the review is that this goes into my top 3 of all time Final Fantasy games. It goes behind Final Fantasy X, which is my favourite game of all time. And then it goes behind Final Fantasy VII Original, which I don't think, no matter how good they did this, is not going to beat that in terms of just the nostalgia that I have for that game. It was my first ever Final Fantasy. What I will say for this game is that although it doesn't have many flaws, it does have some flaws, but overall it is exceptional and worth the 100 hours that I've basically put into it. So I want to go through that slightly. So let's talk about the game in general and how it's set up. So it's basically start from Calm, straight after Midgar, all the way through to the Forgotten Capital. If you are unsure what happens in the Forgotten Capital, then there's many a video out there. But yeah, it goes through that set piece. And yeah, the basic premise is you get an area, so we start off in Calm. You then go through these open world areas where they have the Ubisoft towers on, which open up the map and all the stuff on the map. You do these open world activities ranging from getting um, a boost to the summon that you can get and making it easier to defeat them, to going around fighting the enemies on the ground to summon a bigger enemy, getting Moogles, doing Chocobo stuff. There's this like open world bit, and it's um, quite clearly shown on the map. You do all of that stuff, and then when you're ready to progress with the story, you go to the next dungeon. So if you think of the grasslands, which is the very, very first thing that you would do in the game, which in the original is where you would go and get your chocobo. You would go across the swamp, trying to not fight Midgar Sommer, um, and then you go through to the mithril mines. So in this example I've just given, you do the grasslands, which is all your stuff. You go through the mines to get to Junon. You do all the Junon stuff. When you're ready, you go to under Junon and up into Junon and all of that stuff. And then Junon and Nishinra 8 is its own little thing. And you get over to Costa del Sol and the Coral region. You do all of that sort of open world bit. Then you go to North Corel to get to the Gold Saucer, where we are on the screen right now. And it is that sort of gameplay loop where it's open worldy exploration, and they cleverly hide behind a lot of the stuff behind the chocobo ability that is different to each region. And you then go and do your dungeon to progress the story. And what I found was that the open worldness of it, just as it was starting to get a little bit tedious, tenuous, it would be done. I'd have done it all, and you'd go into your dungeon. And it was really good. I found that really, really satisfying. And what made it even more satisfying is the stuff that you get for doing all of this side content really does help you, but it's not game breaking, but it helps you get, um, better materia, better equipment for the story. So you're rewarded. And some of the games open world games of recent dates that I've done is you do not get that reward. So you go and do all the side content and you get a collectible. You're like, great, thanks. That's not really helpful. Whereas here you get rewarded for doing it. And again, kudos for that. Um, let's touch on the story a little bit. I won't talk about spoilers, but it starts off a little confusing. It continues to be confusing throughout it. And then just towards the end, it sort of starts to tell you where it's going. And yeah, it's you're not going to get 100% answers of everything, but it's the game literally opens up really, really well, and it's just amazing. So that's a tool I didn't read basically, or don't care. It's the third best game in the Final Fantasy series for me. If this doesn't win Game of the Year, there's going to be something that's really, really sort of amazing to beat it, and can't think what that might be. Story was good, combat's good. I thought the open world into dungeon and sequences was good. It's just a very, very well executed game with some sort of flaws that I will come on to as we go. Now, I want to talk about the visuals off the start, and for me, this is probably the weakest part of the game. So for 95% to probably 97, 98% of the game, it looks great. You'll be blown away by it. I played the game in performance 4K mode most of the time and had very limited graphical glitches. I've had one crash in the whole game. But yeah, it looked great. Normally you play, say, on the PlayStation 5 4K, you're suffering for frames. Didn't feel that. But there are occasions where, and I'm guessing it's because of the sheer vastness of the game, the graphics quality isn't great. So the best example I can give you is when you go and do sort of the side content and do the mini game to lower the power of a summon, it zooms right in, and the boxes that is just behind you are really poor. You know, the quality of them is really, really bad. There's a couple of times where the rendering on some of the faces of the characters hasn't come in well, and it does detract a little bit from the game, but they're very, very few and far between. But they're there, and I have to call it out. It's like the door from Remake, just a bit more known, a bit more apparent, I should say. But it doesn't detract from the actual game. But barring that, visually wise, it's really, really good, especially in the battles. The visuals in the battles with all of the flashiness that are in them are spectacular, and it really does help improve the overall gameplay. But we'll talk about the gameplay. So we're going to talk about the story. I think the story has to be addressed. I can't give you a review without talking about the story. So I'm going to give you a spoiler warning here. I'm going to keep it quite high level, but I can't review the game without talking about the story. So last spoiler warning. Okay, so as I said, this is set between the period between Calm and the Forgotten Capital. The Forgotten Capital ends with that scene of Sephiroth coming down with his Masamune, stabbing Aerith, Aerith dying. So it's a hefty, hefty chunk of the game. There are some things that are missing, so you can't get to Wutai at all. You can't get to Rocket Town at all. Bone Village doesn't exist. And the Temple of the Ancients, instead of being at the bottom near Medeal, which you can't get to, is at the top of the map towards where Bone Village is. So they've almost like substituted Bone Village for the Temple of the Ancients. Guessing that's just from a map gameplay design. I'm not overly fussed with you can't get to Wutai because there's a whole subplot of Shinra and Wutai going back and warring again, which I thought was really well done. And Rocket Town is omitted, and obviously normally Rocket Town is where you'd get Sid and the Tiny Bronco. They bring Sid in at Gungaga and his plane, and you use him to sort of fast travel around a little bit. And then after Nebel, you get to sort of have free reign with the boat because, yeah, something happens to the plane. Him and Vincent aren't playable at all, which I wasn't unexpected. It's very similar to how they portrayed Red in Remake. So, yeah, there's them. But I'm guessing the gist of what people want from the story is, does she die? And the answer is yes and no. There's two scenes that play out, and one she dies, one she doesn't. And there's very much a timeline and a dream sequence. So all this stuff with Zack is apparently in a dream, but a dream playing out. So it's almost like a different timeline, multiverse, you know, all the stuff we've known from Marvel recently. And they've set it up almost like she's a Force ghost at the end. And it's starting to play out. It's some of the questions you have from Remake and the whispers, and there's good whispers and there's bad whispers, and they sort of try and counteract each other. And the good whispers are for the live stream, and it looks like she's coming from the live stream and into Cloud to guide him. And yeah, it was all really a bit weird until probably the last few parts when we got to the Forgotten Capital and the Temple of the Ancients, where it all started to replay back and you get a bit of clarity. But it's still not sort of 100% perfect, and they've got to leave it open for the next one. But my gut feeling sat here right now is at the end of the third game, at the final game, is the two worlds will sort of merge, and Zack and Aerith will go off on their own and do their own thing. And the others will see them almost like you see Tidus float away back to Dreamland. Yeah, there will be an Aerith and Zack thing. Yeah, and that's sort of the story. It's, as I said, you get more fleshed out Rufus. You get a more fleshed out characters. There's a scene in the Temple of the Ancients that for me is one of the best pieces of storytelling I've seen in a game, where you get to see more of the sad parts of people, of the characters' lives, and it really nails down their motivations for doing this. And they've had the time to be able to do this. Like a whole Rufus narrative, a whole New Turk narrative is in this, and it helps to build up their characters. You know, you're fighting them. Now Rufus comes in remake. He takes over from his dad. You fight him there, and then the next thing you know, after him giving you some materia on the ship in OG, is that he gets obliterated by a weapon while he sat in his tower. No, not here. It's a lot more fleshed out. There's a lot more story behind it, a lot more thought behind it, and I really appreciate the effort that they've gone to flesh out them. So yeah, it's, yeah, I'm really, really impressed with how they've done the story and how they've handled it. Where should we go next? Gameplay. The TLDR on gameplay is, if you love Remake, you're going to love this. The combat has been enhanced more with Cloud and Tifa being able to go up into the air and do air juggling. It enhances their sort of gameplay mechanics. You've got synergy abilities now, which are used to unlock 3 ATB bars, unlimited MP, better limit breaks, increased stagger time. Even though I do think the increased stagger time needs to be more increased, because sometimes you launch that off literally as you stagger it, and you still only got like quarter of a stagger bar left, and you don't have the time to do it. I think that needs to be, or should freeze the stagger while you're performing that activity. It's probably one of my other minor gripes. Very, very, very minor. Yeah, each of the characters feel very unique in playing. I wasn't a big fan of Kate Sith. I wasn't a big fan of Red in the end. Just Kate Sith was very much luck based, and you spin around. And by the time he came into the game, I was quite au fait with most of the others. And Red's main gimmick is you need to block or just take damage to build up your vengeance gauge, and yeah, not the type of gameplay that I liked. Probably my favourites were Cloud, Yuffie, and Tifa. But they all played very, very differently, and it's really, really good. And once you get into that sort of combat loop, you know, you're going in, you're assessing how am I going to damage these enemies, what they're weak to, pressure, stagger, work out what you need to do, what attacks you need to avoid, what you can block, what you can't. It's very, very good, but it still kept that core ATB-ness from the original and in remake, where you do your activity, you know, your general basic attacks. It builds up your ATB bar, and you can unleash magic items. Yeah, all your abilities, and then there's, you know, other material that you can get that mean that you can use items without spending ATB bar, so that helps in some of the battles. But it's just a very, very solid gameplay combat. You have story boss battles that are really, really good. They're very few and far between, obviously, because of tends to tie to one of the locations. So the 6 in general, so grasslands into the ethereal mines, Junon into sort of the Junon region into Junon, and then the Shinra 8. You then got Corel into Costa del Sol, gold saucer, the Corel region with the reactor and wastelands, Gongaga with its reactor, Cosmic Canyon with sort of Red's sort of side story, and then Nebel up to reactor. Nebel was quite small in terms of region, but massive in terms of gameplay and the mana and everything. And at each one of them stages, you had some really good boss battles. I really enjoyed like the Lost Number. It wasn't called the Lost Number, but the Lost Number in the Shinra Manor, for instance. Really, really good. But then you had these sort of fiends out in the world, and then once you do the world intel, you get more powerful fiends, which were really, really good, and some of them kicked my ass, which was really good. And then you got the VR missions, again, taking that up another notch. And there was only one real annoying battle there, which was against the Mind Flare, with two other enemies. You had to kill the Mind Flare first to get Mind Blast, the enemy skill, and it is horrible. It's like, I'll probably never do that battle ever again. Yeah, all of them are really, really good. You know, there's a lot of combat here, there's a lot of content here, and it's just enjoyable from the moment you start battling. And there's enough flexibility to pick a team that you like. You can stick with 3 people for most of it. There are times where they force parties on you, but I won't say they're few and far between. That does happen quite a bit, but they're short, compact. You get through it. Like in the Mithril Mines, you have everyone, and then suddenly you've just got Red and Barrett for story reasons, right? And it just works. You know, you get to use them, you get to understand them, and it's needed because then when you get to Red's piece in Cosmo Canyon, again, you're forced into a team, but you got used to them, and it gives you flexibility to use all of the characters, and you're not overly punished. Obviously, you're stuck with Cloud the whole time. I believe in post game you don't have to be locked with him anymore, so it'll be good to try different party comps. But he's really good to use and really, really good. So there's that. Let's talk mini games. So mini games are generally enjoyable. I really enjoyed Chocobo Racing, hence why it's up while I'm doing this review. And yeah, that in Queen's Blood was really, really good. Last Queen's Blood challenge was a bit of an arse. But most of the mini games are really, really good. There's a couple I didn't enjoy, the pianos and Glide the Chocobo. I'll come on to it a bit more in my dislikes, but yeah, most of them are good, enjoyable for what they are. And again, they give you some decent rewards off the back. Going to quickly touch on music and sounds. So what can I say? Music in this game is top tier. Say some of it's playing in the background now quite lightly. And if this doesn't win music at best music in the Game Awards, then there's miscarriage of justice. It just has to. They've done such good sort of work on reimagining the classics, but making them their own and stand out. Really, really good. And then you can go and butcher them in the pianos if you really fancy it. The sounds are crisp, sharp. The clinging of the battles, just the general noises. I've had no glitches. Yeah, just the general sounds have been amazing. Oh yeah, so also want to talk about the voice acting as well, because kudos to the team as well, because it's really, really well voice acted. And I come back to the scene at the Temple of the Ancients where there is, let's say, some of the best storytelling that I can recall in a game. And that's only because it's so well acted. The heart, the soul that they put into this is amazing. So I just need to stop and pause and say kudos for them, because without them, it wouldn't have had that impact that it has had. So let's talk about probably the few things that I didn't like about the game, and I found them a little bit grating. The first thing is Chadley, and I think he's going to be topping most people's list of most disliked and annoying things in the game. He gets super annoying really quick. He has a partner in crime who's just as annoying, and she reminds me of Welch from the Star Ocean franchise. And the worst thing about this is every time you do the world intel, which you're going to do at some point just to get the content that you want to play, And every time you interact with the world intel, he has to pop up and say something. And it's not short, it's long, like 3 or 4 lines of dialogue, and it sits there and it rates you over time. And when you're doing the world intel, it's the thing that drives you not to want to do it because of Chadley. You then have VR missions, which is, the battle simulator. And to get into that, you have to speak to Chadley, and he has to say something about something before you can get into it. And you talk to him, and probably talking about 10 seconds or so. But each time you go in and out and in and out, and I'll come to that in a mo, it's really, really annoying. And he's just ends up talking about stuff that you've already completed because he's got nothing else to talk about. And you just want to move on with your life. And he sat there chatting. It's like, shut up, Chadley. So yeah, he's annoying. The second thing that I did find annoying, just on the top of that, is in the VR missions themselves, I quite enjoy the battles. They're really, really challenging. Force you to do some party setups to get around a few things. But what I dislike is you can't edit your team, your materia, your equipment in that menu. You have to come all the way back out, go to the menu, do all the tweaking that you want, go back in and battle. And then you have to listen to Chadley most of the times while you're doing this. And that is why I don't like it. Because I just want to go, I'm going to fight this, this, and this. Like the Mind Flayer battle for Mind Blast. You going in, you're going to try something. It's going to fail. You're going to try a different tactic. It's going to fail. And each time you have to keep coming in and out. And it just adds needless delay. I'm hoping they patch in an ability to edit your party in their menus. And it will just null and void this point. Third thing that I disliked is just some of the I'm going to say the mini games, because for the most part they're great, and then they have decided to make it so it's really, you have to really, really perform perfectly. So if you like Glide the Chocobo, you have to get every single ring perfectly, and that means if you don't flawlessly go around the map, you miss out. Good luck trying to do Red 13's piano mission for an S rank. I can't get on A rank at the moment. It's just too many notes. And again, there's no need for twin stick. Just use one stick and make it a bit easier for people. Not everyone has got perfect responses, perfect vision. Yeah, you can't. Some people just find that they can't concentrate on the two ones at the same. The two dials at the same time. They've just overly tuned it to make it overly difficult when I don't think they needed to. So yeah, just some of the mini games, and those, the piano and the chocobo one really stick in my head. But it's even down to like the ghost ship one, where some of the sort of areas that you need to shoot are so small and easy to miss that it's just there as a frustration. It just doesn't need to be that difficult. They could tone down the difficulty to still make it slightly enjoying. So yeah, mini games on the whole really good. A few nitpicks around just the tuning of them. And the final dislike is, did I mention Chadley? Can't remember if I mentioned Chadley. Just yeah, he just needs to be toned down in the next one and just not coming in as much as he was on this one. And that's it really. That's really the only gripes that I've got for the game. For me, it's Game of the Year contender already. Such a great game. As I'm recording this, it's release day for Dragon's Dogma 2, and that looks maybe a contender for this. But they have to go a long way to beat this. I say I've put 100 hours into this, and I've probably enjoyed 95 of them, with 5 hours just trying to repeat a few battles, and probably, I'm going to say probably 2 hours of not enjoying it, and that's trying to do some of the mini games. It's just a flawless, but as flawless as a modern game can be. So yeah, I say 100 hours plus into it. It's not felt like a slog. The story beats flow straight into combat quite nicely. They've taken time not to rush people through, but give a good overall experience. Flesh out the characters, flesh out the story, flesh out the interactions. Doubled down on the interactions for combat and made that even better. It's just, yeah, a game I'd 100% recommend to any Final Fantasy fan and any fan of an action RPG. So yeah, that has been my review of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Full playthrough is on the channel. Yeah, at this point, it's probably going through to mid-April for the release cycle for this. Let me know in the comment section down below what your thoughts of the game, what you liked, what you didn't like. Were you a fan of how they did the story? Just try and keep it moderately spoiler-free, if possible, because some people will skip out on the spoiler bits for the story. But yeah, there'll be some more Final Fantasy content coming away shortly. And thank you very much, and I'll see you all in the next one.